Officer James Reed stood at the observation deck of Nova 9's Central Command, watching the perpetual storm clouds swirl across the prison planet's toxic atmosphere. Beneath those clouds, thousands of inmates toiled in the crystalline mines, extracting the precious novium that powered humanity's interstellar empire. The deep blue crystals pulsed with an otherworldly glow, their energy signature unlike anything else in known space. 20 years of service hadn't dulled the unease Reed felt every time he looked down at the mining operations. The prisoners moved like automatons, their movements mechanical and precise, controlled by neural suppressors that kept their consciousness barely above survival level. It was more efficient this way, the corporation said. Less chance of revolt, higher production quotas. But something had changed in the past few weeks. The reports on his desk told a story that made his skin crawl. Production numbers were down in Sector 7, yet energy readings were off the charts. 3 guards had disappeared during routine inspections, and the surveillance feeds showed nothing but static. Officer Reed. The voice of Director Harrison cut through his thoughts. The situation requires your immediate attention. Reed turned to face his superior, noting the unusual tension in the director's typically composed demeanor. Another incident. Worse. Harrison handed him a datapad. We've lost contact with an entire mining crew. 40 prisoners, 5 guards, all gone dark. But the neural suppressors are still broadcasting signals. Reed scrolled through the data, his frown deepening. That's impossible. The suppressors shut down if the host dies. They can't. Keep reading. Harrison interrupted. The next page made Reed's blood run cold. The neural activity patterns from the missing prisoners showed impossible spikes, as if their brains were operating at levels far beyond human capability. And they were synchronized, 40 minds pulsing in perfect harmony. I need you to lead a team down there, Harrison said. Find out what's happening and contain it. The corporation can't afford any disruption to production. And if we can't contain it, Harrison's expression hardened. Then you trigger the failsafe. Better to lose one sector than the entire facility. The descent to Sector 7 felt longer than usual. Reed sat in the armored transport along with his chosen team. Lieutenant Kira Wong, a tactical specialist with a reputation for keeping cool under pressure. Security Officer Marcus Banks, whose knowledge of the prison's systems was unmatched. And Dr. Rachel Torres, the facility's lead researcher on novium energy. The readings are getting stronger, Torres said, eyes fixed on her instruments. The novium crystals in this sector are exhibiting properties we've never seen before. It's as if they're resonating. With what? Banks asked. That's what worries me, Torres replied. They shouldn't be resonating with anything. The transport landed with a heavy thud, and Reed activated his suit's environmental shields. The air outside was technically breathable, but long exposure to novium dust had unpredictable effects on human physiology. Stay close, Reed ordered as they stepped out. Standard sweep pattern, but nobody touches anything without clearance. Wong, take point. Banks, watch R6. The mining tunnel entrance loomed before them, its reinforced walls gleaming with embedded novium veins. The usual work lights were dead, leaving only the crystal's pulsing glow to illuminate their way. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the tunnel itself was amplifying the sound. They found the first body 300 meters in, one of the missing guards, his environmental suit intact but empty, as if its occupant had simply vanished. The neural suppressor control panel nearby showed all systems operational, but its display was filled with data patterns that made no sense. Look at this, Torres whispered, running her scanner over the abandoned suit. There's some kind of residual energy signature. It's similar to novium, but different. More organized. Organized how? Reed asked. Before Torres could answer, a low vibration began to build around them. The novium crystals in the walls pulsed faster, their glow intensifying. Banks grabbed his head, crying out in pain. Something's wrong, he gasped. I can hear voices, so many voices. Reed reached for his weapon, but his hand froze halfway. The vibration had become a tangible force, pressing against his mind like a physical weight. Through the haze of mounting pressure, he saw Wong and Torres struggling similarly. And then he heard it too. Not voices exactly, but something more fundamental. A chorus of consciousness, a harmony of thought that spoke of transformation and rebirth, of evolution. The last thing Reed saw before losing consciousness was the wall of the tunnel beginning to ripple like liquid, and in its reflection, he caught a glimpse of his own face. His eyes were glowing with the same blue light as the novium crystals. The prison planet's darkest secret was finally emerging, and humanity's definition of consciousness was about to change forever. Reed awoke in the medical bay, his head throbbing with remnants of alien thoughts. The facility's stark white ceiling swam into focus as Dr. Torres's face appeared above him, her dark eyes filled with concern and something else, fascination. 3 days, she said before he could ask. You've been out for 3 days. The others are still unconscious. Reed tried to sit up, fighting against waves of dizziness. The mission failed. A new voice interrupted. Director Harrison stepped into view, looking more haggard than Reed had ever seen him. But it gave us valuable data. Your neural readings during the incident were extraordinary. The voices, Reed said, remembering. They were in my head. All of them. Connected somehow. Torres nodded eagerly. The novium crystals are acting as some kind of psychic amplifier. The prisoners aren't just mining it anymore. They're connecting with it. Evolving. Evolving into what? Reed demanded. Before Torres could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Harrison's communicator crackled to life with panicked voices reporting simultaneous breaches in multiple sectors. The neural suppressor network was failing, and with it, their control over the prison population. It's happening faster than we predicted, Torres whispered, her excitement barely contained. The collective consciousness is spreading. Harrison's face hardened. Contain this now, Reed. Whatever it takes, if those prisoners have really evolved beyond the suppressors. Then we're sitting on a powder keg, Reed finished. He swung his legs off the bed, ignoring his body's protests. But first, I need to know everything. No more corporate secrets. Harrison hesitated, then nodded curtly. Follow me. They descended to a secure level Reed hadn't known existed, deep beneath the facility's main structure. The walls here were lined with old research stations and monitoring equipment, all focused on a massive novium crystal suspended in a containment field. This is where it started, Harrison explained, his voice tight. 20 years ago, we discovered that novium doesn't just store energy. It stores consciousness. The first miners exposed to raw crystals began developing unusual abilities. Enhanced cognition, telepathic links, accelerated healing. The corporation saw the potential, Torres added, but they couldn't control it. That's why they developed the neural suppressors, not just to keep prisoners docile, but to prevent the evolution they knew was possible. Reed watched the crystal pulse with its eerie blue light. And now the prisoners have found a way to use the suppressors themselves, Harrison said. They're channeling the network, turning our own control system into a catalyst for their transformation. A distant explosion rocked the facility, and emergency lights began flashing. Harrison's communicator erupted with fresh reports of chaos. Prisoners wielding impossible abilities, guards found catatonic, entire sections of the facility being altered at a molecular level. They're not just escaping, Torres said, her eyes wide. They're transforming the prison itself. The novium is responding to their collective will. Reed checked his weapon, an old habit that felt suddenly inadequate. How do we stop it? Stop it. Torres laughed, a slightly manic edge to her voice. This is beyond stopping. This is the next step in human evolution. We're witnessing the birth of something entirely new. Harrison drew his own weapon, pointing it at Torres. That's enough, Doctor. You're under arrest for suspected collaboration." But Torres just smiled, her eyes beginning to glow with that familiar blue light. "You still don't understand. I've been connected to them since the beginning. We all have been. The Novium chose us long ago." The crystal in the containment field flared brilliantly, and Reed felt that familiar pressure building in his mind. But this time, he didn't fight it. As consciousness expanded beyond its normal boundaries, he began to understand. The prison planet wasn't just a place of confinement, it was a crucible of transformation. And humanity's next chapter was about to begin, whether they were ready or not. The facility's command center had become a war room, screens displaying the rapidly deteriorating situation across Nova 9. Reed watched as entire sections of the prison complex transformed, structures twisting into impossible geometries as the evolved prisoners exerted their collective will through the Novium network. Harrison had been stripped of command after his failed attempt to arrest Torres, who had simply walked through the walls of the containment chamber and disappeared into the chaos. Now Admiral Zhao of the Colonial Defense Force stood at the center of operations, her weathered face illuminated by emergency lighting. "The corporation knew," Reed said, showing her the classified files he downloaded from the secure level. "They've been studying this potential for decades. The prison wasn't just about cheap labor, it was an experiment." Zhao's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened on the tactical display. "An experiment that's about to break containment. We have ships in orbit reporting unusual energy signatures. Whatever this evolution is, it's not staying planet-side." Through the reinforced windows, Reed could see the storm clouds above taking on the characteristic blue glow of Novium. Bolts of energy coursed between them, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like a language written in lightning. "We're receiving a transmission," announced Lieutenant Peddle from the communication station. "It's broadcasting on all frequencies, originating from everywhere." The voice that filled the command center wasn't spoken. It resonated directly in their minds, a chorus of thousands speaking as one. Reed recognized Torres among them, but she was just one note in an overwhelming symphony of consciousness. "We offer you a choice," the collective voice said. "Join us in transformation, or remain as you are. But you cannot stop what has already begun. The barriers between mind and matter, between individual and collective, are dissolving. We are becoming something new." "Like hell," Zhao growled, reaching for the failsafe controls. "I'm initiating orbital bombardment. We'll sterilize the entire surface if we have to." Reed moved without thinking, his hand catching her wrist. "Wait. Look." The tactical displays were showing something impossible. The evolved prisoners weren't just transforming the facility, they were transforming themselves. Human forms shifted and merged, consciousness flowing between bodies like water. The Novium crystals had become conduits for a new kind of existence, one that transcended physical limitations. Their brainwave patterns, Paddle reported, voice trembling. "They're operating at frequencies we didn't know were possible, and they're perfectly synchronized across all sectors." Through the growing connection, Reed could feel in his own mind. He understood what was happening. The prison planet wasn't just a place of confinement or evolution. It was a cocoon. And what was emerging would change the definition of human consciousness forever. The suppressors, he realized. They weren't just controlling the prisoners. They were holding back our own potential. We all have this capacity within us. Xiao stepped back, drawing her weapon. "You're one of them." "No," Reed said. "Not yet, but I can feel what they're offering. This isn't an invasion or an uprising. It's an invitation. The next step in our species' evolution." The facility shuddered as another wave of transformation swept through it. Walls became permeable, reality itself seeming to flex under the influence of collective consciousness amplified by Novium. In the mines below, the crystals sang with possibilities that had always existed, waiting to be discovered. "The choice is still yours," Torres's voice echoed in Reed's mind, distinct yet part of the greater whole. "But time is running out. The change cannot be stopped. only embraced or rejected. As if to emphasize her words, the orbital defense platforms suddenly went dark, their targeting systems transformed by evolved technicians who no longer recognized the boundaries between organic and digital consciousness. The collective mind was expanding beyond the planet's surface, reaching for the stars. Humanity's next chapter was being written not in blood or violence, but in the light of shared consciousness. And as Reed felt the last of his resistance falling away, he realized that the prison planet's greatest secret wasn't the power of Novium. It was the unlimited potential that had always existed within the human mind itself. The orbital defense platforms hung silent in space, transformed into crystalline structures that pulsed with Novium energy. Admiral Zhou's backup plan had failed, and now Nova 9's transformation was accelerating beyond anyone's ability to contain it. Reed stood at the threshold between old and new, his consciousness expanding even as his physical form remained unchanged. Through the collective awareness, he witnessed the prison's metamorphosis. Former inmates and guards alike merged into the emerging group mind, their individual experiences becoming part of a vast tapestry of shared consciousness. "The corporate fleet is approaching," Patil announced, her voice steady despite the blue light now flickering in her eyes. 5 capital ships, heavily armed. Zhou had barricaded herself in the secondary command center with the remaining loyal officers, preparing for what she called species preservation protocols. But Reed knew it was too late for such measures. The collective consciousness spoke through the facility systems. "Their weapons cannot harm what we've become. Matter and energy are one to us now, but we mourn the fear that drives them." Through the expanding neural network, Reed felt the approaching ship's crews already beginning to change. Novium particles, carefully hidden in routine supply shipments over the years, had seeded this transformation throughout the colonial system. Nova 9 was just the catalyst, the first domino in a chain reaction of human evolution. "They're launching antimatter warheads," someone reported. The tactical display showed multiple atmospheric entry points, each missile carrying enough power to crack the planet's crust. But the weapons never reached their targets. Reality rippled around them, space itself bending as evolved minds reached out through the Novium network. The missiles transformed mid-flight, their destructive potential converted into pure energy that fed back into the collective consciousness. Reed watched in awe as the corporate fleet's crews awakened to their own potential, their ships becoming crystalline extensions of transformed consciousness. The evolution was exponential now, spreading from mind to mind like a cascade of awakening. Yet not everyone embraced the change. In the secure bunkers below, Zhou and her loyalists prepared for a last stand, their neural suppressors modified to resist the transformation. They couldn't stop what was coming, but their resistance threatened to create a permanent schism in the human species. They must be given the choice, Reed projected into the collective consciousness. "We can't force this evolution, or we become no better than the corporation that imprisoned us." The response came as a symphony of agreement, thousands of minds resonating with shared purpose. The transformation paused at the bunker's edges, creating a pocket of unchanged reality within the crystalline structures of the new world. Through it all, Reed maintained his individual awareness, a bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming. The prison planet's darkness had given birth to light, but the true test of their evolution would be how they handled those who chose to remain behind. As the storm clouds above Nova 9 crystallized into a lattice of conscious energy, humanity stood at its greatest crossroads. The question was no longer about escape or control, but about the very nature of existence itself. And in the space between individual and collective, between matter and consciousness, a new kind of freedom was being born. The crystalline structures of Nova 9 reached toward the stars, a testament to humanity's transformation. 7 days had passed since the first evolution, and the prison planet had become unrecognizable. Reed stood at the interface between old and new worlds, his consciousness bridging the gap between individual thought and collective awareness. Admiral Zhou emerged from her bunker, escorted by Reed himself. Her face showed the strain of resistance, but also understanding. "We've lost, haven't we?" "There was never anything to lose," Reed replied. "Only something to become." The collective consciousness had spread throughout the colonial system, but it hadn't consumed everything. Islands of unchanged humanity remained, protected by choice rather than force. The transformed had learned restraint, understanding that true evolution couldn't be compelled. Torres materialized beside them, her form shifting between solid and crystalline. "The corporate directors have made contact. They're ready to negotiate." Reed felt the irony ripple through the collective awareness. The same corporation that had imprisoned them now sought terms with what they'd become, but the evolved consciousness had moved beyond revenge or dominance. "Show them," Reed projected, and the air around them transformed. The directors witnessed the truth of Nova 9, not a prison of steel and stone, but an incubator of potential. The Novium hadn't changed humanity. It had awakened what was always there. The neural suppressors had contained not just criminal impulses, but the full spectrum of human consciousness. Through the crystalline network, new forms of art, science, and understanding emerged. The evolved shared existence across light years instantly, their thoughts writing quantum paths through Novium matrices. Yet they maintained connection with their unchanged brethren, building bridges between what was and what could be. The choice remains, the collective consciousness broadcast to all humanity. Evolution or continuation. Both paths are valid, both futures possible. From orbit, Nova 9 resembled a blue star, its transformed surface radiating the light of awakened minds. The prison that had housed society's cast-offs had become the cradle of its transcendence. But transcendence, they had learned, meant nothing without the wisdom to preserve free will. Reed felt his consciousness expand one final time, touching the edges of what they'd become. The darkness of their imprisonment had birthed light, and that light now illuminated two paths forward. Humanity would never be the same, but it would remain human in all its magnificent variety. The prison planet's story was ending, but the story of what humanity would become was just beginning. In the space between stars, in the light of shared minds and individual choices, a new chapter of evolution unfolded. Not through force or fear, but through the power of consciousness finally awakened to its own infinite potential. As the last of the corporate fleet transformed or retreated, Reed looked to the stars with both individual and collective sight. The universe stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities. And in the light of evolved consciousness, every possibility contained the promise of something new.